Picture a city older than most nations, a city of 3 million souls, ancient walls, and morning markets on the Yangtze River. In 1937, the maps of China were being redrawn, in blood. Shanghai had already fallen, and the Imperial Japanese Army was moving west, toward the capital. The Japanese generals gave their orders, and those orders would define the worst 6 weeks in the history of East Asia. The Chinese army retreated and left the city without its defenders, and 3 million people knew what was coming. But a small group of Western civilians refused to leave and made a decision that would save 200,000 lives. December 13th, 1937, the gates broke open. That night, the ancient city of Nanking burned. Inside a 3-square-kilometer zone, 200,000 people crowded together and prayed the line would hold. The soldiers moved through the streets, and no door was safe. At Mufu Mountain, thousands were marched to the riverbank and never came back. The Yangtze River ran red for days. One man, a German businessman named John Rabe, wrote it all down. Back in Japan, 2 officers made front-page news for competing to kill 100 people with swords. An American missionary named Minnie Vautrin stood at an iron gate alone and did not move. Inside the safety zone, children waited, eyes wide, completely still. 6 days in, and the killing was still accelerating. The old city burned, and the beauty of centuries became ash in hours. From above, the safety zone looked like water filling a jar. Every space taken, every person pressed against the next. John Rabe stood between the soldiers and the refugees, wearing a Nazi armband that no one knew was his only protection. Thousands tried to cross the Yangtze at night, and many didn't make it. When the Japanese general rode through the captured city in triumph, he was surrounded by ash and silence. The messages reached London, Washington, and Paris, and were filed away. 2 weeks in, and the numbers that no one wanted to count kept rising. One man, Reverend John Magee, hid a camera under his coat and filmed what the world refused to see. One Buddhist monk continued his prayers in a temple surrounded by ruins, and the soldiers passed by. Justice was 8 years away, and some who deserved it would never face it. Minnie Vautrin wrote, "I wish I could sleep." She sat in the dark and kept watch anyway. Inside the zone, ordinary men risked everything to help strangers. In the dark, moving quietly, choosing courage over safety. This was not chaos. It was organized, systematic, and commanded. Even the ruins of a dynasty, the old Ming Palace, were now occupied by a new conqueror. Deep inside the ancient city walls, families hid in darkness and kept their children silent. December's cold didn't know who was a civilian and who was a soldier. It just froze everyone equally. Some Japanese soldiers sat alone by the river and did not open the letters from home. The numbers ranged from 100,000 to 300,000. And even that uncertainty is its own kind of horror. When the fishermen returned to shore weeks later, they stepped into a city they did not recognize. The diaries, the films, the letters, these survived when their authors could not. In January 1938, the worst of the killing slowed, but the occupation was only beginning. Nanking breathed again, but differently. At the station, 200,000 survivors bowed to one German man who was leaving, and could not take them with him. By 1939, the whole world was burning, and Nanking's 6 weeks were swallowed by an even larger catastrophe. In 1946, the generals stood trial, and the evidence included film that was never supposed to exist. The survivors spoke. For the rest of their lives, they spoke, and their eyes never stopped carrying December 1937. Today, in Nanjing, there is a building whose entire purpose is to make sure no one forgets. But what happened is still disputed, and that dispute is still a wound between two nations. In 1997, a young Chinese-American woman named Iris Chang told the world, in English, for the first time. Nanjing today is 8 million people, ancient walls, and a river that has been flowing since before the memory of any nation. Most of the dead were never named, and most will never be named. In a world that looks away, who is responsible for making sure this is never forgotten? Every soldier carried orders signed in the emperor's name, and those orders were never questioned. In the safety zone, food kept 200,000 people alive, ladle by ladle, day by day. The city's ancient gates, 13 of them, each told a different story of what was passing through. In Tokyo, propaganda made the invasion look glorious, while in Nanking, the reality was something else entirely. They signaled for boats across the Yangtze, and no boats came. Underground, in the dark, families waited, teaching their children to be completely silent. The market that once fed thousands dissolved from color into ash in the space of a single December. In the 5th week, snow came and covered everything equally, the ruins and the survivors both. She knelt in the ruins of her home, and the camera kept its distance, because some grief is not for cameras. By spring, the river ran clear, but the river doesn't remember what we put in it. The same child, 80 years apart, same eyes, same soul, carrying 1937 in them always. Some of the perpetrators went home, became fathers, neighbors, shopkeepers, and were never punished. The cables to London were filed, and London kept its distance. The great bell of Nanking was silent for 6 weeks, and when it finally rang again, the city wept. From the general to the private, the chain of command is traceable, and the Tokyo tribunal followed it to the top. When the journalists finally arrived, their notebooks filled so quickly they ran out of pages. Between 100,000 and 300,000, the gap itself is a confession of how much was destroyed. The Yangtze has seen dynasties rise and fall for 3,000 years, and it keeps moving south. The letter was addressed, stamped, and never sent, found 40 years later in the ruins of a life. Every year on December 13th, the entire city of Nanjing stops and does not move for 60 seconds. Dehumanization is a technology, and it was used deliberately, systematically, and with results. The soldiers photographed it, and those photographs became evidence at their own trial. The hospitals flew Red Cross flags, and the flags were ignored. Today, children climb the ancient city walls, their laughter on the same stones that sheltered the terrified. Picture a full stadium, 80,000 people. Now picture that 3.5 times. That is the minimum estimate of what was lost. The plum blossoms bloomed in January, as they always do, and no one had asked their permission to keep going. The city wall is 33 kilometers long. It is the longest surviving city wall on Earth, and it is still here. John Rabe's house is now a Chinese museum, a complicated man, honored by the people he protected. In the same 6 weeks, atrocity and courage, massacre and protection, both real, both human, both happening simultaneously. The river is gold at dawn, the city alive with 8 million people, the walls still standing. And the question for all of us is, what do we do with what we know?